are, and then we'll start Ois Dalet. The Kitzur of Ois Aleph, what happened in Ois Aleph? Shechina b'tachtonim, Shechina below Iker, Shechina b'tachtonim. Yuvari explains the Kavonas B'riyas HaElemis, the ultimate purpose of the creation of the world, Sheyeh b'tachtonim, that there should be a dwelling place in the lower realms, and how is that brought about? V'nas al yedei yiskafi v'yisafcha, subduing and transforming. Shemam shechlet Seve, that we draw down our Seve, and that's in all of the worlds equal. That's where it's out. Where it's base, we learned about Karbonis. Yivar inyan of Karbonis ba'avayda. Explain the inyan of Karbonis in Avayda. The Adam ki yakriv, that pasuk Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lovaya, which is still on the board. Adam ki yakriv, sarach liyos mikem korban, has to be from your korban. The Rebbe explains only the second shot in Mikem in the Kitzur, not the first. Eish shalamayla ve'eish milamata. There's a fire from above and a fire from below. And what is that? The fire from above, Avad the Nefesh Elokis. And the fire from below, with the Nefesh Abamis, the Avad the Nefesh Abamis. That's the fire that has to be kindled. Avad the Nefesh Abamis, how does that happen? Ba al yedei yislav shus Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Abamis, by the inclothing of Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis, which means, what does that mean? How do you get your Nefesh Elokis into your Nefesh Abamis, so to speak?
By learning Chassidus?
By learning Chassidus. Beautiful. Absolutely. To think about godly thoughts in a way that the animal soul can understand. It also has an intellect. Right? I saw you owing that coffee now. I saw it. I saw it. Okay. After all we talked about Shtus and Taivas and Elmaza, and you're eyeing my coffee. That's what they say. Well, they say his coffee is not drinking your own, and his hafka is transforming the other guys into yours. You just elevate it to Yavar the Ruach Shtus. Is Gimel Teikef a Taiva of the Nefesh Abamis Bechlal, the power of the Taiva of the Nefesh and the Nefesh Abamis itself, in general. I'm sorry. Mechasim. What do those two things do? Taiva is the Neilam Hazeh, and then the general nature of the Nefesh Abamis. Mechasim ala emes, hide truth. V'germim heder hergish elokus v'iloi mitzvahs, and might produce, might cause a lack of sensitivity to godliness and the beauty of mitzvahs, meaning a lack of sensitivity to those two things. And the third thing, a lack of sensitivity to the pechisus, the lowliness, pachot, from less, right? The nothingness, the lowliness of harichuk mihem, of being far from them. Okay, so now in Eis Gimel we said, what's the Ruach Shtus? The Rebbe is going to explain something that bothers everybody when they learn Eis Gimel, because we know, of course, that a Yid can't be disconnected from the Eibishter, and yet in Eis Gimel the Rebbe says that the Ruach Shtus is that I won't be disconnected from the Eibishter if I do this Aveira. But that's not true, the Rebbe says you will be. So how does that all work with the fact that a Yid is a Yid, Yisrael Shechata Yisrael, who Chazal say a Jew that doesn't Aveira is still a Jew. So how does that all work? So the Rebbe is going to explain. Amnam, however. Amnam. A guy with a name like Moshe is surprised that someone else's name shows up in the book. Your name, Baruch Hashem. You can't escape it. Especially now, Shmais, oh my goodness. Vidaber Moshe. Moshe, shut, quiet already. Amnam. Zeh she'nefesh ha'ba'amis. That which the nefesh ha'ba'amis. Mechasal nefesh Elokis. Now the Rebbe is going to give us a little synopsis of everything we learned in case we forgot. V'hainu, Ruach Shtus, spirit of folly. Shemechasa umaylim al ora emes. That conceals and hides, covers. In case it's really a covering. It covers and hides, conceals. Al ora emes, the light of truth. V'gilui, and revelation. V'hainu, what does that mean? Simply, dos was welt is maylim of elokus. Dos, that, was, in this context, which. Welt, world, is. Mailim conceals ufelokus, conceals godliness. That which the world conceals godliness. Hurak ala mides, the nefesh elokis. Aval lo ala atzmus, the nefesh elokis. When we talked in the previous chapter about the fact that a mitzvah disconnects a yid from the Eibishter, that's relative to what's called here the midas of the nefesh elokis, the emotional attributes of the godly soul, but not the etzem, not the essence of the godly soul. I was going to explain that at great length. That's why we can do tshuva. Tehina, ksiv Yaakov chevel nachlosei. It says Yaakov, a rope is his inheritance. Pasuk in Devarim. End of Devarim. The hiskashus and neshama belakus, the connection of the neshama to the Eibishter, who chevel, the mashal is like a chevel. Now we also talk about a beam of light, which is going to be mentioned also, but generally the mashal is a chevel, a rope. A rope that comes from above, connects, how do you connect the ceiling to the floor? How do you connect the high place to the low place? A rope. And what's this rope? Hashazur. Shazur means it's braided. Right? Mitar Yagnimin. This rope has 613 strands. The chevel hu neshama atzma. The chevel is not that which connects the neshama to the Eibishter. In the mashal, the rope is the neshama. The neshama is the rope that descends from above below. And it has 613 strands, so to speak. It's all a mashal. But it's a mashal that's true about the nature of the neshama. What does that mean? That each mitzvah is a different expression of the nature of the neshama. Right? That's why the neshama consists of these 613 strands. The neshmasa shel adam, that the neshama of a person, who a chevel is the rope, hamakasher belakus, that connects him to elokus. Ulazais and neshama atzma, and that's why the neshama itself is shuzur mitayagnimin, is braided of 613 strands. Kedisa b'seif shobein perik nun aleph, it says in the 51st chapter of Tanya. The neshama klula mitaya keiches. The neshama has 613 different powers. Again, each power expressed through a particular mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, a means of connection.
What does it mean? Ukedisa b'shasa para?
Ukedisa b'sefer shel beinonim. Meaning Tanya, perik nun aleph. Okay, the first part of Likutei Amarim. A book called Tanya. Famous book. You should look, but you should see the book, Josh. It's a good book. You should learn that book. You should learn that book. You can start today. Learn that book. It's a good book. As Zusha Vanapoli said when he saw Tanya, what was his famous statement? How did he take such a big God and put him in such a little book? That's what Zusha said about Tanya. He wrote one of the, what do they call emendations? What do they call the beginning of the book? Haskama. I know Haskama. What was it?
Approbation.
Approbations. That was called Haskama. Okay, so he wrote one. Who wrote the other one?
It's
very interesting because he was little known. Yehuda leGani, another Talmud of the Maggid. Now, have you ever seen anything of Yehuda leGani? I've heard of Rav Zusha. There's stories galore of Rav Zusha. Everybody knows about Rav Zusha. He was Rav Elimelech's brother. They're both very famous. Rav Yehuda leGani, very quiet Talmud of the Maggid, but it happens to be very interesting. I've never been there, but this is what they say. By the Maggid, if you look at the Maggid, on his right, just like Tanya, on his right is Rav Zusha, and on his left is Rav Yehuda leGani. At the Tzion of the Maggid of Mizrich, where he's buried, they're both there. Which is so interesting. And that's how they show up in the page in time. Zusha and Yehuda leGani. Which is very interesting. We know very little about him. Obviously, an important Talmud of the Maggid. He's buried next to the Maggid. He wrote an approbation for Tanya. Did he write a sefer? I'm not sure. I don't think he wrote a sefer.
Where was he?
A Talmud of the Maggid of Mizrich, the contemporary of the Alter Rebbe.
Okay.
He wrote Haskama on Tanya. I mean, if you open up Tanya at the very beginning, there's Haskama. So the one from Rav Zusha Vanapoli was famous, many stories of Rav Zusha. And the other approbation is Rav Yehuda leGani. Who is he? obviously someone very important, but I don't think we have a sefer. And for that reason, he's not well known. Whereas people quote things from Sfarim of everybody else. With Levi Yitzchak B'Ditchev, everybody knows with Levi Yitzchak B'Ditchev. Lots of stories, but also a very important book, Kedusha Levi's book that everybody reads. Kedisa b'Sefer Shabbanim Perek Nun Aleph. The neshama klula mitaya keiches. The neshama had 613 powers. Again, each power expressed in a mitzvah. What's a mitzvah? Mitzvah miloshin tzavta, a means of connecting. The soul is all about connecting you and I down here to the Eibishter up there. And the soul is connected. It's the means of that connection. It's the ladder, the rope that we climb. V'tama davar hudama Razal. Sanhedrin, it's a Mishnah. Perek Dalid, Mishnah Hey. Gemara Sanhedrin. Chayev Adam Lemer Bishvili Nivra Elam. A person it's obligated to say, for my sake the world was created. There's a lot of people who are very, very makpid on this Mishnah. This Mishnah is the single most important piece of information ever presented to humankind. That everything is for me. Okay, so what does that mean? The Olam Umiloshin Helam. What does it mean for me? The Olam was created. Helam was created. Concealment was brought about for me. The kol echad ve'echad, each and every one of us is obligated. Chayav leimer the helam v'tzimtzum arishan, the concealment of godliness and the first constriction of godliness. Nivra bishvili was created for me. What does that mean? It was created for me. Bichdei levarar lezachatay, that I have an obligation to rectify it and purify it. In other words, I have an obligation to undo that concealment and bring about a revelation of the Eibishter in Elam Hazeh. That's why the Eibishter hid himself. The Eibishter hides himself in order that you and I can find him. That's our Veda. That's why what we do actually means something and is real. A malach, what malachim do is very amazing and very important, but it's in no way, shape, or form as impressive as what we do because there's no energy that's trying to negate that Aveda of the malach. Whereas you and I down here, there's all sorts of energy pushing against us. Va'adam hu b'tzir ramach evarim v'shosa gidim. A person, our body, has 248 limbs and 365 gidim. Gidim are sometimes called muscles, sinews. Right? And what are they? Shehem b'mispar taryag, that they also are mispar taryag. In other words, our body is a perfect kli to clothe the neshama, because our body is also a kli of 613. 248 limbs, that corresponds with 248 positive commandments, and 365 sinews. Women have 4 extra evarim, which are the evarim of holada, of birth. But women also, chayiv mitzvahs. Lochein, kol ha-madreg, another ever says something interesting about 613. Kol ha-madreg is b'ishtashlus, all the different levels in ishtashlus, him b'mispar zeh, are in this number, 613. Now generally, what's the number you think of when you think of ishtashlus, downward emanation, revelation? What number comes to mind? 10 spheres, right? That's what you would think, right? That is what we think. Okay, so that is true also. Obviously, the world is in the most revealed way a function of 10, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, which are drawn down into every level, and you and I sort of revealed the notion of 10 pretty clearly in most of our reality. On my feet, I have 10 toes. They're not lady toes, they're men toes, and I use them as mementos of my haunted memories. Huh?
Earlier when the Rebbe talks about Tzimtzum, of Hashem concealing himself for us to go find him.
He said Tzimtzum Rishon in the first one. Yeah.
Is this similar, if not the same concept that the Rebbe brought down in the Mimer we learned maybe 2 or 3 Mimarim ago, where the father hides and the child goes and looks for the father?
It's a mashal for the same thing, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, 100%. Right? He has to realize he's not really hidden. Right, 100%. So, but as much as 10 is the most revealed expression, we know that every revealed expression contains within it many, many different levels, and therefore, the notion of 613 is also an idea that represents every single different level of reality, and b'pnimius you can find 613 different expressions of every different state of reality. And the simplest way of understanding that is everything is a function of the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his desire that such reality should come into existence. And what's the ultimate expression of the Eibishter's will? 613 mitzvahs. Right? Why 613? 6 times 100 plus 13. Okay, what that 13 is, what that all is about. There's Chassidus that discusses the Indian of 613. 6 meaning the 4 different directions plus up and down. 100 being the completion of 10 times 10, which is the whole expression of the 10 spheres. And Yud Gimel is Gematria Echad. All of that somehow combines together to give us the reality of 613. But 613 is because the Kadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be, is the ultimate expression of his Ratzon, the complete expression of his Ratzon. Right? And so therefore every single expression of that Ratzon can also be expressed in the notion of 613. That's why the Rebbe says, Kol Madregas, B'ishtashlu, same as Mispar Zeh. V'lochin in the Gamba and the Neshama, so too in the Neshama, as it descends down, our Yesh Gamke, Tarya Keiches, 613 powers. Each power, an expression of the will of the Eibishter, each power, that which allows you and I to connect in an incredibly powerful way to the will of the Eibishter that's expressed in the mitzvahs. Shebehem tluyim atayig mitzvahs. That in them are dependent the atayig mitzvahs. That's very interesting, what the Rabbi just said. Which is dependent on which? What are those words again? Yesh gam kein tayig kekes in the soul. Shebehem, that in them tluyim are dependent or hanging atayig mitzvahs. You would think it would be the other way around, right? That the 613 keiches of the soul are an expression of the 613 mitzvahs, but the Rebbe says, no, the 613 powers of the soul, the mitzvahs are, so to speak, hanging dependent on the 613 powers of the soul. But that's very much in line with the idea that we've run into here and there, and which is a very important idea, and we saw it when did we actually talk about it last? I don't remember. But the idea, the idea of the neshama of the yid being before the Torah. Right? So the Torah depends on the neshama, not the other way around. So the nature of the neshama is what defines what Torah is going to look like, because Torah exists in order to serve the neshama. Even though you and I down here, we listen to the Torah and do what it says. That's true. But ultimately, the Torah exists in order to allow the Jew to connect to his or her essence. Right? So the Jew is the 613, therefore the Torah has to be 613. So interesting the way the Rebbe expresses it here. The chevel zed the neshama, this rope of the neshama, harimiskasha belakus, is connected to the Eibishter. Ukemei chevel, just like a physical rope. Where's a rope? One end of the rope is connected to the ceiling. Sheni, and the second level of the head of the rope, the second end of the rope, kasher lamata, descends down to, now it can either be connected below or it can just hang below. The ropes that you had in gym class that you would learn how to climb up, so they just hung below. They weren't attached, but a rope can also be attached. Obviously, a rope can be attached from one end to the other end. Right? So the rope descends down and is clothed in our body and vitalizes our body. Right? And by virtue of the rope, the physical rope, right? There's a connection. So the ceiling and the floor are not so separate. Because even though I'm standing on the floor, I learn how to climb up the rope and I can touch the ceiling. So too the rope of the soul. One end of the rope is tied above. What's that? That's the connection of the lower level K, meaning the neshama is elukus. So it's a piece of the Eibishter connected to, so to speak, the rest of the Eibishter. And the way it's expressed is the lower level K of Yud Kei Vav K, the second K, with the Gimel Eisius Yud Kei Vav. Now this will be ultimately Havaya de La'ela that we learned about in the Chanukah Maimer. V'reisha echad, and one end of the soul descends down is kosher lamata. Vohu baharas and neshama, and that is now here the Rebbe uses the mashal of a light. That is the illumination, the ray of the neshama. Hamislaveshes begufa adam, that's clothed in a body, lachayosef, to give it vitality. So the neshama, the mashal that the Rebbe is focusing on here, he's going to go right back to it, is the chev. But there's also the mashal of the neshama as being like a ray of light that descends down and illuminates the lower realms. Okay. But it's connected to its source above. We saw earlier the Rebbe talked about the spark of the neshama also. V'zeu, and this is pshat, 4 lines up. Yaakov chevel nachlasi. Degam b'madregas and nemuches, even lower levels, more simple Jews. Shehem bebechinas ikvoim, that they are, so to speak, like the heels of the Jewish people. Jewish people is considered a koma, like one whole person. There's a head. The head is Rebbe, Rosh B'nai Yisrael. So Rebbe is an acronym for Moshe Rabbeinu. So he's the head. And the head is where, that's the command center of the goof. And then the goof has different limbs that express the ratzon of the head and bring about that which the head alone can't bring about. The head can't go anywhere, can't walk, right? Can't pick things up. Right? So even on a certain level, can't even speak. I mean, you say that the mouth is in the head, but the head isn't speaking, the mouth is speaking. Right? Okay, so the head is the control center. That's the source of it all, and so that's the highest level, obviously. But then there's all sorts of different levels of what goes on in a goof, and every level is very important. There's also simple people who are like the feet, the heel, right? Which of course is Yaakov. Yaakov is the heel. Yisrael is the Rosh. Yaakov is Yud Akev. The Akev, the heel, is connected to the Yud. Yisrael is Li Rosh. To me is a head. 2 different levels of Yidden. 2 different expressions of Yidden. Yisrael and Yaakov. So even the simplest Jew, Dargas and Nemuche, simple people. Those simple people, through the rope of the soul, they're connected to the essence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, as much as anybody else. So to speak, Shehem Nishmas Yisrael are Nachlase Shel Maila. They're the inheritance of above, meaning we're one with Him. We're offspring. We're one with Him. Nachla is a very, very interesting thing. We're actually going to see in our Gemara the words you're going to get for it tomorrow. What's the difference between inheritance and purchasing? Right? So inheritance, someone who inherits basically becomes the person they're inheriting from. Right? They just are in their place. It's as if it's still them. Buying something, so the object is transferred from one person to another person. There's inheritance if Reuven inherits from Yaakov, so he becomes, for all intents and purposes, Yaakov. So whatever reality relates to Yaakov will relate to Reuven. That's going to come up in our sugya. Children.
Yeah.
Shuma Hadar. To whom did Shuma Hadar? Okay. Kipi. It's hard not to think of some figure on a cereal box. Kipi. That's so good. He's Mafki Kipi. What, this little person who has big eyes with little ears? He's called Kipi? No.
It's a jewel on his chest.
Yeah, right. It's jewels. Kipi. Nachman.
Something you want to keep.
Great sugya. The Gamba Madregas and the Milcha Shem Bechinas Ikvaim Hine Al Yedei Chevel the Neshama, through the Chevel of the soul are in Kshur Basmas. Kovi Yochel Shem Nishmas Yisrael Nachlase Shel Maila. They're one with the Eibishter. There's inheritance. Val Yedei Zehem Kshurim Betachlis Is Kashrus, and through this they are connected with an absolute connection. Oh, okay. So, in Ois Gimel, now the Rebbe is obviously going to now make Seder of all of this. In Ois Gimel we learned, and this is the Ruach Shtus, and not that anything we learned in Ois Gimel isn't absolute truth. We just have to understand these 2 different levels. In Ois Gimel, we learned that the Ruach Shtus that will capture a person and might cause them to do something against the will of the Kadosh Baruch Hu is they might say to themselves, by virtue of doing this, I'm not really disconnecting myself from my Yiddishkeit, I'm not disconnecting from the Eibishter, and therefore it's not such a big deal. Right? And therefore they might chas v'shalom do that action. And what does the Rebbe say? That that's not true. And if they knew the truth, that by virtue of this action they're disconnecting themselves from Elokei Yisrael, from the God of Israel, they wouldn't do it because the Jew doesn't want to be disconnected. That's what the Rebbe told us in Ois Gimel. Now in Ois Daled, the Rebbe is talking about a level of neshama that can't be disconnected. It's essentially connected. So what's the difference? So the Rebbe told us already, we just have to understand it. There's the essence of the soul and the midas of the soul. The essence is connected essentially. The midas could theoretically, chas v'shalom, be disconnected. What's that like? Like a rope. Okay, the top of the rope is connected to the ceiling. That's essential. That's existential. It just is. Okay, but what could I do? I could chas v'shalom, cut the rope. Therefore, the bottom of the rope is no longer connected to the top of the rope. The rope is connected. But there's an aspect of the rope that isn't connected to itself. Right? True. That can happen. Oh, so that's going to be the effect of an avera, is disconnecting the rope from itself. Interestingly, as we'll see very, very clearly, not disconnecting the yid from the Eibishter. That's impossible. Disconnecting one aspect of the neshama, meaning one aspect of the Jew, from who he really is. It's disconnecting the Yid from himself, not from the Eibishter, so to speak, from the godliness in him, as we'll see. Keep reading. Do you want to ask something?
In each Avera, it's not cutting the rope as a whole, but it's cutting each part of it.
We'll talk about it. We'll see. There are averas that cut the whole rope. That's called keros. And there are averas that cut individual strands. That's why I was going to explain. You have to be pretty insensitive to God to do those things that cut the whole rope. That's why we don't get into cars on Shabbos. But a little nick with a razor of one little strand of the, those ropes with the little...
It's fine, it's fine anyway.
I don't even feel it. Unless I'm very sensitive, I don't even feel it. Okay, come on. Let's see it inside first. Okay, let's see it inside first. Blasphemy, or an avera that the person is chayav keres, Isser Shabbos, eating on Yom Kippur. Do they not affect the essential connection? Now the Rebbe is not talking about the essential connection of the top of the rope to the ceiling. He's talking about the essential connection of the rope to itself. Okay, don't make, because we just said that there's a level that can't be disconnected. So then we know that from other places also. So we have to read these words with that in mind. Hainu, b'chlolos iskashu, shem etzem and neshama v'etzem and nefesh, meaning my connection to my essential soul. Valderech tichsiv. What does the pasuk say? Ki aveneseichem hayu mavdilim beinechem levein elokechem. Your transgressions separate between you and your God. Oh, so that sounds like I'm disconnected from the Eibishter. How does the Rebbe explain that? The Elokechem, Perish, Elika Shelachem, the godliness in you. Hainu, Elokusha b'neshama. What does an Avera do? An Avera disconnects us from the essence of ourselves. Doesn't disconnect the essence of ourselves from the Eibishter. The essence of ourselves is connected to the Eibishter, and that's an essential connection that can't be broken. What can be broken? The connection of that essential state to my conscious state down here. And when that's broken, so then it's a very, very, you think about it, how unhealthy a state that is, that I'm putting myself in a place where I'm not connected to who I am. I'm completely discombobulated. Which is what Averas do. Hainu del Elokusha b'neshama v'inyonim elu. These things, these major averas affect the essential connection. Again, The general connection, not essential. General connection. Again, the essential connection, the general connection of the rope to itself, not the rope to the top of, not the rope to the ceiling. The rope is, I mean, if you think about it, if I cut the rope, so where am I cutting the rope? I'm cutting the rope, I'm not cutting the that which connects the rope to the ceiling. I'm cutting the rope itself, so I'm cutting the rope from itself. That's a serious Aveira. And that's why, relative to those Aveiras, if someone has any sensitivity whatsoever to Elokus, they don't go there. It's very hard to feel, not to feel when someone cuts off your leg, God forbid. Whereas a little nick, you might not feel it. What to explain? Regarding our essential connection, there's nothing that conceals that. And that's why when something, again, a Jew can even be insensitive to that, but that's an incredible level of insensitivity. And interesting enough, that it takes, I was thinking about that on the way here, trying to fight my way through Chittus today. It was one of the few days of the year that I can't finish Chittus on the bus ride. It's so long. Brace yourself for a lot of Rashi today. Give yourself a lot of time. It's going to take a while. So, but I was thinking, well, I really should have been thinking about the Rashi, but I was also thinking about this mimer at the same time, which is, I guess I wasn't really thinking about either of them. But how it takes a few generations to get Yidden to a point where they're almost completely insensitive to Elokus. Took Ashkenazim about 3 or 4 generations. Sephardim aren't there yet. Baruch Hashem. Sephardim aren't there. They're still connected. They're still, unfortunately, there's powers that are doing their best, but they're still there. Especially Sephardim my age, if they don't have a kippah on, they're, what do they call them? Non-observant religious Jews. He's a religious Jew. He just doesn't do as much as he's supposed to do, but really, who is he, right? In the army, I always remember, right, you needed a minion. So who could you count? Right? And what would happen? They'd come into shul. If they didn't have a kippah in their pocket, they'd go into the drawer and they'd take out a kippah and they'd put it on their head. And then you'd need mincha, someone had to say Kaddish, so immediately 5 guys would show up. Right, okay, Kaddish, and show up, and then one of them would walk to the Amud, and without a siddur, he'd daven mincha, he'd say Chazar Sashatz, the whole thing. Right? No tzitzis, no kippah. You don't want to know what he was talking about during the day, right? What was going on, right? Okay. How far is he? He's not really that far. Why? Well, because there's this essential connection that's still, it's radiating in there, right? And so he's probably one of those guys who, and this, unfortunately, his kid isn't exactly like him because it takes a while, right? He's one of those guys who probably goes to shul, he makes Kiddush Friday night, right? And he goes to shul in the morning, and then he goes to the Beitar Yerushalayim game in the afternoon. The Jerusalem soccer team, which stopped playing game. Because of Baruch Hashem, a lot of the games were moved to Saturday night. Which you and I call Motzei Shabbos, because there were so many people who didn't want to go to the games on Shabbos. Soccer is what the Sephardim in this country watch. Basketball is what the Ashkenazim watch.
Yeah.
There's Ashkenazim at the soccer game also, and there's Sephardim but in terms of the demographics, soccer is very much, there's violence in the stands at the soccer games. I'm just finding them to be a little more passionate than Ashkenazim. Okay. Yeah.
It's also interesting. They never buy into the shtus. Like all these organizations, like Jewish Voices for Peace, or like just Hollywood.
Not Sephardim.
Never.
No, you're right. It's very interesting.
So interesting.
Right. Now, on the 3rd or 4th generation, maybe, but you're right. That's very interesting what you just said. That's an Ashkenazi thing. Because the Ashkenazim are already generations removed. The Sephardim are one, well, it's now two, but they're very, everybody in Morocco was Shomer Shabbos. There was no such thing as a Jew who wasn't Shomer Shabbos in Morocco. It didn't exist. Then they brought them here, and they did their best to take them away from all of that. That was what they did, right? The Zionists, right? I know you're not allowed, Zionists is Kodesh Kedoshim, you're not allowed to say anything negative about Zionists, sorry, but they went out of their way to take the Sephardim away from their tradition. Look what they did to their kids. 95% of the inmates in Israeli jails are Sephardim. Why? Well, because they completely destroyed Sephardi society. They took them away from everything they knew. What did they know? Torah, mitzvahs, Shabbos, kashrus, that's what they knew. They wanted to turn them into Europeans. Can't be Europeans, they're going to be godless. Sephardim can't be godless, it's impossible. You want godless? Talk to an Ashkenazi. He's keeping Shabbos, he's godless. Sephardim, no way. Right? The Rebbe says that's why Sephardim didn't need Chassidus until fairly recently. There's no Chassidus by the Sephardim. Why? They didn't need Chassidus. They were connected without it. How can you do that? We can't even imagine such a thing. Right? Once they came and started hanging out with Ashkenazim, what did they need? Chassidus. Right? It's so amazing. Ashkenazim, we're so amazing. Yeah, we're amazing. We can take the God even out of a Sephardi. There's such a purity in their Yiddishkeit. It's amazing. The Pashut Yid. How many Pashut Yidden are there amongst Ashkenazim? Now, there were. In the old country, there were. Sephardim, still you see it. You don't see it as much now because you live here. When you used to live over there by the old place in the yeshiva and you'd walk between the yeshiva and Machne Yehuda, who would you see? The old Pashut Yidden, these Svardish guys, 45 years old, all covered in oil on their hands and on their clothes, and they're going in there, they're looking for a tent for their minyan in those shuls on the Rehov Yehudit, right? With the curtain in front of the shul, and you take a peek inside, and there's 8 guys saying Tehillim in there, and there's one guy outside trying to get a minyan, and there's 4 of those shuls, and they won't daven together because these guys are from Tunisia, and these guys are from Morocco, and these guys from Iraq, and these guys are from everywhere, and they just like, why don't you just make 3 minyanim? They've got 38 people here, 36 people here. Right? No way. Jews, they're the greatest. Pashut the greatest. Okay, fine. So, but they're just it's such a lesson in purity and just Pashut a Yid, and they're connected to Atzmus.
This exemplifies like the different shuls that the Ashkenazim used to have in the old country.
Yeah. A big shtot would have all sorts of different shuls. There'd be shuls for the cobblers and shuls for the blacksmiths and shuls for this. And everybody had their shul. I don't know, that's how they did it. They had their shuls. I don't know. They hung out with people they could talk to and what to say. Right? You want to talk during Kaddish. You can talk to you have no one to talk to, right? You have no one to talk to. I'm going to talk to. This guy, he takes care of horses and I take care of sheep. So I'm not to talk. I wanted to hang out with the guys who take care of sheep. Right? In the modern world, what would it be? The golfers would have their shul, and the tennis players would have their shul, and the skiers would have their shul. They have what to talk to with each other, except they're not in shul. So they have their clubs. So the golfers have their clubs, and the tennis players have their clubs, and the skiers have their clubs. That's what they do, right? A tennis club. And the golf club might have tennis courts. Tennis club doesn't have golf courts, right? So it takes up too much space. Where do all the tennis players go? They belong to a club. Of what? Tennis players. Why? They want to hang around with people who like to talk about what they like to talk about. So after the game, they sit with their towel around their neck and they go into the place and they, drink their Coke or their beer or whatever they drink, and they discuss their forehand, and everybody feels, at home.
Wasn't that something they do? I thought like the shoe cobblers, or there's someone who, the tanneries, because they smell.
The guys working in the Bosi, in the tanneries, so they had a terrible smell because of the chemicals, and I don't know what it was. It wasn't chemicals in those days, whatever they used to tan the leather, so it had a horrible smell. And it's even relative to kedushin, right? someone says, behold, you're betrothed to me on the condition that I don't work in that, and he does work in that, so then it's not a proper kedushin, because why would she want to marry someone who works in that business? It's a terrible smell, etc. I mean, any tanai, but that's one of the tanai, and one of the conditions that's brought up. Come on, let's go further. Right. So regarding the essential connection, there's nothing that hides that. But what? So that now, again, the Rebbe's talking about this connection of the rope to itself, not the rope above. Yes, the rope above also, but when the Rebbe's talking about here, he wants to explain why it is there are certain aveiros that it's going to be difficult to get a Jew to do if they have any sensitivity. Right? V'yidu aletzem and the shamar ein shum davar ma'alim u'master ulozois. Fifth line. Kasher ba'ez a davar. When something happens to a Jew, it comes something hanegeya that affects, literally touches, but conceptually affects. B'chlolos iskashus nafshe, in the general connection of his soul. Sheyochol liyed nifrad al yedei zeh mi'elokus chasron, that it can be disconnected from the Eibishter in a complete way. And again, we're talking about cutting the rope. Canal the Ish Yisrael Eino Reitzes, as we said earlier, a Jew does not want b'shum oifen in any way, ve'eino yochel, and isn't able chas v'shalom lipared me'elokus, to be separate from the Eibishter. Lochen nirgash etzlei davar zeh, he's sensitive to this. So getting into a car on Shabbos, the Jew is sensitive to that. Doesn't want to do that. Aval b'share aveders, chas v'shalom, but other aveders, she'enim b'kodesh, that are not b'kodesh, mean they don't affect the neshama as completely and as negatively. So here's the mashal that we were talking about before. Nimim pratim, they're individual strands. It's like taking a razor blade and nicking at the rope. So I might not feel that. It's not felt by him so much. So there's certain areas that we might fall prey to. So amazing. It's not, meaning there's this psychological and sociological aspect of it, which is really what the Rebbe was talking about in Ois Gimel. The Ruach Shtus will affect me because I'll think about certain things a certain way, and we talked about it, and it's certainly true that also depends on what's my community, what might it be that I'm able to convince myself is not such a big deal? Well, okay, if I look around, I see a lot of people not so careful about that. It's very much easier for me to convince myself that it must not be such an important thing. Whereas if I look around and I see people that they consider it very, very important, so that I guess that's something that I'll probably be pretty careful about. Whereas other things, maybe not. Okay, no question. In certain communities. So women covering their hair is basically optional. Okay. So that's going to be a bigger challenge for a woman in that community than in a community where there's no such thing as not covering your hair. It doesn't exist. Okay. Right? The Rebbe wants women to wear shaitlach, so in Lubavitch. Might there be certain communities where people are less stringent and you might see a woman go out who's not in a shaitel now and then? Okay, so then it's going to be easier for a woman in that community to convince herself it's not just a big deal. Whereas if she's in a place where that just never happens, okay, so then it's going to be very difficult. She's just not going to think about why in the world would you even think about such a thing. Okay. Right? Talking in shul. If you're in a shul, everybody talks, it's pretty easy to talk. If you're in a shul where no one talks, and if you talk, some nudnik goes, shh, so then you're probably not going to talk. Now, the Frierdiker Rebbe said he has less enjoyment from the shusher than he does from the guy talking. The shusher bothers the Frierdiker Rebbe more than the guy talking. Not that he likes the guy talking, but he doesn't like the shusher. Even that bothers him even more. He said, "Okay, beseder, so don't be a shusher either, right?" And sometimes you see it's just wild because it's just crazy. Like you see a shusher who's in the middle of Shemon Esrei and he shushes. What's Asher al Pi Shulchan Aruch, right? I mean, you're not allowed to shush. So someone's phone goes off in the middle of Shemon Esrei, which obviously he didn't mean to. It's a mistake, and he feels like a jerk, right? And his phone went off, and four guys in the middle of Shemon Esrei, shh. He didn't do an avera. You just did. What are you doing? Right? Okay, so that's pretty dumb. Okay, so we have to be careful about these things. Right? The Friedrich Rebbe said he doesn't like shushers. Okay, so don't be a shusher. If your position is to be a shusher, you're a teacher and they're your students and you're responsible for that. Okay, the Seder's, you have to tell them to be quiet. That's different. But if you're one of the students and some other student is talking, so you think 4 times before you shush them up.
Walk away.
Right? Shh. Leaking record. You don't have to hate. Don't hate. There's bigger evils to hate. There's bigger evils to hate. L'chein ein nirgashim v'sakav. V'hagam, that even though the ba'avroi al achas mi mitzvah savaya, that even though when he transgresses one of the mitzvahs of Hashem, asher tziva la'asoi son, that we're commanded, that he commanded us to do, v'eina ois, and he doesn't do it. In other words, a person is mevatel a mitzvah saseh. He doesn't do a positive commandment. Or she'oisa achas, he does one of the mitzvahs, mi mitzvah savayo, he does one of the mitzvahs asher tziva Hashem levilti lasos, that Kodesh Baruch Hu told us not to do, meaning he's aver alav, he transgresses a negative commandment. Hari al yedei zeh, what does he do? Nifsak, it's broken, hanima protis, the individual strand of the neshama. In this particular strand, all of the essence of this aspect of his connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu is being affected. But it's still one little strand, so I might not be sensitive to that. Not only is it one little strand, it obviously weakens the rope in general, but I might not feel that either. I think when you walk into gym class and you look at I don't know if you see a few more hairs sticking out of those whatever they're made of, hemp or whatever it is, those ropes. So it's not you don't think that if you climb the rope's going to break in the middle. If you see a slash halfway through the rope, so then you're probably not going to use that rope. Okay, but there's a few little pieces that have snapped. They're okay, it doesn't look so serious, but it still affects the rope. Ubechol zeis, hine, meaning nevertheless, hine, behold, liyosem rak nimim pratim, since they're only individual strands, hare'ena nirgash etzlei, you might not feel it so much. You have to be very sensitive to feel that. We're commanded to develop that sensitivity, but that sensitivity is harder to develop than the sensitivity that one needs regarding Chil Shabbos. That's a little. Turning a light on Shabbos, so that's not going to be much of a challenge for a person not to turn on the light. I mean, it's the having to turn on the light. Because that's a disconnect completely. In that realm, in that place where it's hard to be sensitive, it might be that the midas of the nefesh habahamis, that the emotional attributes of the nefesh habahamis, and emotions are that which connect me to things, so I might get connected to things that are not part of what a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants me connected to. They conceal and hide alamidas and nefesh elokis. What do the midas and nefesh elokis want me to be connected to? The Eibishter. What do the midas and nefesh habahamis want me to be connected to? Other things. Doesn't feel the godly light, the godly energy, right, in that particular realm. So therefore, he might do something. And that's the reason. That's why he might do an aveira. Again, the nefesh habahamis is going to have a very hard time convincing him to get into a car on Shabbos, and he's just not going to do it. Why not? Because he's very sensitive to how destructive that is in terms of his relationship with the Eibishter. So again, there's the psychological aspect that we learned about in Ois Gimel, and now the Rebbe is talking about the spiritual aspect. What's the ruchnius of it all? Ruchnius of it all is that's taka. Why is the sociological reality the way it is? Because the ruchnius is the way it is. So there's certain aveiros that sociologically it might be that certain communities will allow themselves to do, because you have to be pretty sensitive to be aware of this disconnect. And so there'll be certain places where it might be a greater challenge for a Jew based on what's going on around him and the metaphysical reality of that disconnect. Okay, not okay, but that's the way it is. And that's a challenge for that person. Shabbos is not going to be much of a challenge. And it comes from the Ruchnius. Which is first. Obviously, the Ruchnius is first, and the sociology follows. But there's also sociology involved. It's what he looks around and sees, what's considered okay. Right? It's interesting in Lubavitch yeshivas. So this goes back about 26 years ago. Our oldest son was going to yeshiva Ketana. In those days, before that, so Lubavitcher Bochrim, it wasn't kapada that they wear white shirts in yeshiva. They had to wear a button-down shirt. It wasn't like, it could be a light blue, it could have some stripes. It wasn't a thing in Lubavitch. But what happened? Got out of hand. And it became a whole deal, like what shirt the guy was wearing. Right? And I remember exactly what happened, because I remember going to buy shirts for my sons. We bought some white ones. We were in Borough Park. We also bought some, like nice dress shirts, but with a blue line, a red line, So all of a sudden we got a letter from the yeshiva. New Mediniyut, only white shirts. And they explained, because it's got out of hand. That the people the guys are like into their shirts too much. They're buying these nice designer shirts, whatever. Okay, so only white shirts. That became a thing. What?
Judgment.
No.
The rule.
Yeah, a rule. Right? A rule, the custom of the place. The new rules. I guess there's a better word, but okay. Regulations. Right? Right? So white shirts only. I remember it happened when our son, he's 40 years old, so he was 14. He went to yeshiva.
Was that in all the boxes?
That became us in here in Eretz Yisrael. Everybody. I don't know what goes on in America. I'm not sure. Right? I mean, based on what you see when they come here, it looks like there's not much of such a regulation. Right? But I mean, that is a perfect example of sociological pressure. You don't have to dress looking like a yeshiva guy. Why not? Because that's just the way it is in Lubavitch. Find a Satmar Bacher who doesn't dress the way a Satmar Bacher dresses. Whereas you'll find a Lubavitcher Bacher dressing like a kid on the college campus. Why? Seems okay. It's not. Not for a Bacher. I don't meet guys around here. I mean, a Lubavitcher Bacher who grew up in Lubavitch, he should dress like someone who's representing Lubavitcher Rebbe. What does that mean? You should dress like a Lubavitcher Bacher. That means you should be dressed in a suit and a hat and a white shirt. That's the way Lubavitcher Bacher is supposed to look. You're right. Look at the pictures of everybody from Europe. People didn't look that way. You're right. They didn't. Everybody had one pair of pants, right? And maybe two shirts, right? Rav Nanas once told me about the Seder in Lubavitch, and he was talking about how the Seder, we've talked about it, right? We don't have to go through the whole thing. It's too late to go through the whole Seder. But the Seder in Lubavitch, so I asked him, so what happened Fridays? He said Seder would go until about 3 hours before Shabbos. So in the summer, that meant Seder went till 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. They'd have a whole Seder Friday. And there was no Mivtsoyim. He didn't need Mivtsoyim in Russia. And in the winter, so Shabbos came in at 3 o'clock. So they'd have, they'd learn Chassidus and daven, and then that would done eat, and then they'd start preparing for Shabbos. So, and then he said such an interesting line. He just threw it out. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form a line that was supposed to educate me about anything. He just threw it out as a matter of fact. He said, well, okay, so in those 3 hours, what would happen? Well, and he said, if you had a pair of Shabbos pants, so you would wash your weekday pants. If you had a pair of Shabbos pants. It means there were a lot of Bachurim who didn't have a pair of Shabbos pants. They had one pair of pants. They wore those pants every day. That's what they had. Right? They were poor. Not what we call poor. That you don't have an iPhone, you only have a Galaxy S instead of Galaxy A instead of a Galaxy X. right? That's, oh, never. Poor person, he can't afford an S. He has to have an A. Okay. Never. Right? Okay. So, but now, we're supposed to look. Right? And if they were walking into Yechidus by the Rebbe, that's how they'd look. But not walking with a pair of slacks and a t-shirt and a yarmulke that has some, who knows what on it, some baseball team or something, I don't know. Right? With a cap. They wouldn't walk into Yechidus that way. Okay, but it's become socially acceptable. Okay, say that. Is that what the Rebbe wants? I'm not so sure. Not so sure. She'eina nirgish etzla eloki. Other avails. So the Ruach Shtus can cover it up. Okay. Hine yored, and he can go, he can descend, Rachman al-Tzlan, midechi odechi, to push the way place. Ad sheba lasa is davar isser, Rachman al-Tzlan, until he ends up doing something that's actually osir. V'u mitzad Ruach Shtus kanal, that comes in the Ruach Shtus. So I would just explain the continuation of Gimel. We're finished with Ruach Shtus. The next, we're going to start. Tomorrow there's no shir, right? Because there's there was going to be a short shir, and then but they decided the last message was no. I think you're davening at 7:45 in the morning, and then you're going on a teal. So tomorrow there's no shir.
Yeah.
So Sunday morning we'll start the last ois of the Maimer, which talks about Shtus to Kedusha. Right? Okay. How do you build the base of Mikdash? Shtus to Kedusha.
Rabbi, could you repeat the last line? What the Shtush?
What? The Kitzur?
Yeah.
We're going to see the Kitzur on Sunday. We're going to do it again anyway. So we'll do the Kitzur on Sunday. Okay? So we're going to do all 4 Kitzur on Sunday. Let's do them all. We just finished them all. Okay.
Yeah.
Have an amazing... Well, I think I'll probably come and daven here tomorrow. There isn't a Lubavitch Minyan in my neighborhood that I would want it. I mean, there is sort of, but not really. So I'll come here to daven.
Yeah.
To your trip. Or you will.
Pluvi is leaving us temporarily.
Yeah.
We will miss you. Have a lot of success. And give our love to Argentina. And if you run into the president there, tell him we think he's just
Maybe
the cat's meow, that he's like just a cool guy. Bucks the trend and wins. I mean, the guy, he did something, he just turned it all upside down in a year. Like, how do you do that? People have been trying to do this for 40 years. He did it in a year. So, this guy's got something.
Yeah.
And I guess it's all those visits to the oil. I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
So enjoy and give our regards to all those holy Jews in Argentina.
Okay. Thank you.
And go listen to Rav Farkash.
Yes.
He's Pashut. I mean, you guys have a jewel down there that is unlike just about anybody anywhere else. He's amazing. And I always wondered, how is his Spanish?
Yeah.
Because I've never heard him speak Spanish, and every now in his shirim he asks the Bachrim, how do you say this, right? He's asking for Spanish words. And I wonder, then I didn't listen to the shir because I can't understand it, but I did just hear him saying over a shir in Spanish.
No, he sounds like an Argentinian.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Well, he's just brilliant. So I figured
There
it
are
out.
many shiurim of him in Spanish. Like a lot of.
Yeah, no, because I never heard him speak Spanish. I've always heard him ask for words. Because I listened to him in Hebrew.
Yes, like,
Most of his classes are in Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
There's some in Yiddish. But then I just saw on the Lekutei Sichos app that has different sichos, so I saw him chazering a sicha. So I said, I'm going to click on Asher, and all of a sudden, he was chazering the sicha in Spanish. So, wow, so his Spanish is perfect. Okay,
It's
good.
perfect, really perfect. Yeah.
Oh, good. So that's good.
I wish I
So
could.
go listen to him,
Yes.
and then you certainly won't need me when you come back. So he's something else. He's really something else. A pleasure. We will have an. I'll see you tomorrow morning. I'm probably going to come here and daven. But,
Thank you, Rabbi.
how are you flying?
When?
Through Europe?
No. Ethiopian.